Hi, I'm Rupert Schofield, host of the Social Enterprise Podcast and President and CEO of Finca International, the microfinance network. I have the pleasure of hosting today Carl Jensen, who is a founder and CEO of a company, amazing company called Good Nature Agro in Zambia, which is in, I would guess, the heart of Africa. Would you say that's accurate, Carl?
I'd say that's a pretty good way to put it.
Okay.
Malawi calls themselves the warm heart of Africa, but
That's
Zambia's close enough.
Yeah, a heartbeat away, as they would say, right? So I'm thrilled to have you here. Carl's company is actually a partner of Finca Ventures, which is our early stage impact investing company. When we look for social enterprises, we scour the world for them. And we've found Good Nature Agro to be absolutely one of the highest performing and with the greatest potential, and working in a space which only the truly intrepid people would venture in, which is agriculture, which some people think, investors and bankers, oh, that's too risky. You know, the value chains are not developed. Most of the producers are small farmers who don't use the latest technology. But Carl, this is your show, and I want you to just begin by telling us where this amazing idea came from. How did this journey begin?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Glad to be here as well. I would say that it really began on the farm that I grew up on. I grew up on a family farm in Idaho, fifth generation
I've
farmer
heard of
there.
Idaho.
Yeah.
Isn't it somewhere out in the west?
Some Americans know it. They say it's in the Midwest, and others put it a little farther out there.
I actually have. That's one of the few states I've never come to. So
You're missing out.
Well, I assume I have a standing invitation.
Of course you do.
Okay.
Zambia as well as Idaho, both are on the table at all times.
Well, thank you.
So in that kind of childhood and being raised that way in a family farm, but a rather large one, got exposed to agriculture and kind of the beauty of working with the land and the seasonality and all that goes into it, but also just having a great support structure, which I didn't really come to realize until later, when I moved to Cambodia and started working with small-scale farmers there. This was immediately after college, and I didn't have a whole lot of technical skills, just that sort of practical background, but like a lot of people that travel abroad for the first time, you learn what's applicable and what's not. And so kind of learning by feel there, the first thing that comes to the fore is that farmers don't have a lot of support structure. There are very few services that you can go to for extension information or for affordable credit or even reliable processing and market access. And so that kind of exposure pushed me to get hungry and get back into the search for more technical skills. Went back and studied soil and international ag development, got some more practical experience learning from cooperatives and other farms around the world. And eventually, in the course of getting my master's degree, they sent me to Zambia. Like life often works, you meet one person, in this case my co-founder Sunday. We had a lot in common. He was working on his thesis at the time about the impacts of gender on market access in Zambia. We were working with a group of 40 farmers on an issue around post-harvest storage, and you can't look at one issue like that without seeing all the other areas. You can't look at storage of crops without looking at what it does to market prices. You can't look at market prices without understanding that, it's because production's unreliable. And so very quickly, this model of Good Nature Agro, where you're providing holistic, profit-driven support throughout the entire season, came to be.
That's fantastic. Let's go with that gender thing for a moment. In the African countries that I have worked in, Uganda, Malawi, and Zambia, I found it tends to be the women who are the farmers, really, in the family. Is that the same case in Zambia, or is it men and women, or?
Yeah, it's certainly both, and it does vary household to household. A big part of our model is to be personable but scalable, or personal but scalable. And so we try and make sure that at every household level we're really trying to understand the dynamics. And a part of how we do that is by having a very low farmer to agent ratio. We have an agent on staff, which we call a private extension agent, for every 40 farmers. So our whole model is built on personal relationships, and a lot of time one-on-one between staff of Good Nature and the farmers.
Terrific. Well, tell me a bit about, now I happen to be an extension agent when I was in the Peace Corps,
Yeah.
but unlike you, I grew up in New York City, and we didn't learn a lot of farming there, I promise you. But one thing they taught me in the Peace Corps was, they said, Rupert, you're going to go live in this strange new country with these people that speak a different language, and they've never met an American in some cases. You're going to have to get them to trust you somehow and to listen to you. So what was your experience as someone from Idaho, which they probably don't know is the potato capital of the world, let alone America, but how did you win their confidence so that you could actually convince them of trying something new and risky?
Yeah, just delivering on promises. We've found that that's really the only way. You really, you have to watch yourself, and you have to be very careful about what you're promising. As an entrepreneur, there are times when you end up promising too much. Every entrepreneur can identify with this, right? You're sending your projections out over here, and they look fantastic.
Hey, it worked for me.
But you can never do that with the farmers. If you promise too much and you underdeliver with your real clients, the people that you're really serving, with the farmers in our case, it'll come back to bite you every time. And so we've very much learned and followed on this process of just be very specific, make what you're going to deliver very clear. Don't leave any room open for guessing, in terms of additional services or anything like that. This is where the line stops, and just deliver on it over time. And that applies to every level of the organization. So we started very small. This was a big part of what I think has helped Good Nature long term, is we started with just 40 farmers in the first year. And so myself and Sunday and just one other person that was kind of the core team, we got to know all of our farmers intimately, individually, and their families, and we shaped our training structure and our program around individual lives, rather than starting from an approach of metrics or graphs, or how many people are we going to reach. And so that kind of deep cycle of iteration, which is something we've learned from MIT and from different places about human-centered design and growing that way, that's really what allowed us to grow in the long term. Because we took the time at the beginning to build that trust. And what that translates into is, when we were ready to grow after that first year, we didn't have to go out and convince more farmers to join us. Those 40 farmers went out and they convinced 360 more farmers to join us. And in the next year, those 400 farmers convinced 1,600 more farmers. And so it just grows in that way, person to person. And we personally, I haven't convinced a farmer to join us since year one.
Wow. That's impressive. It sounds like an absolutely brilliant model. Let's touch on the technical side a bit. Now, I understand the kind of heart of your delivery are legumes, and maybe you would need to explain to our viewers what a legume is.
Well, it's a family of crops which everyone's familiar with, whether they know it or not, like peas, peanuts, soybean, and all of these crops are special because they have the ability to fix N2, nitrogen from the air, with the help of bacteria that actually infects the roots and creates this little nodule. And they can translate that nitrogen from the air into a form that's useful for the plant. And so they have lower needs of synthetic fertilizer or other types of nitrogen-carrying fertilizers in order to grow well. And so what we do to engage with farmers is we actually come into it looking from a system of, what are farmers currently growing, and what are opportunities for them to differentiate into. And in Zambia, vast majority of land is still growing maize or corn. In our area, when we started, it was about 74%. And then you can tack on a couple cash crops like tobacco and cotton, and you're at 95% of the farm. I mean, you're almost all covered. But these legume crops, they help rejuvenate the soil, they help bring rotation that actually brings benefit for the maize production, for the other cash crop production. And we tried to look at, okay, what are the opportunities and what are the barriers here? And we quickly discovered that there really wasn't anyone doing good work in seed for legumes. Farmers did not have access to good, high-quality seed of varieties that the market really wanted. Instead, they were relying on just kind of on-farm recycling of varieties that had been around for 30 years. And so without having the right varieties, which can produce better, which are protected against disease, and which the market really wants, they had no reason to shift some of their farm to these healthier crops. And so that's where we began, and where we've been building for about 5 years, is a system where we now have about 4,800 farm families multiplying seed as part of a structure with Good Nature. We purchase it back and we sell to other small-scale farmers in Zambia, Malawi, and Botswana.
That's cool. Now, you're going to have to refresh my agronomic expertise. Do you see, or does a farmer see immediate benefits, and by immediate, I put it in crop parlance, in one season? Will they see a benefit to having the legumes in there?
Yeah, from a number of standpoints. You're asking about agronomics, so that one is a little bit less concrete, but even so, if you look at most of the maize or cornfields around Zambia, you can see, with your agronomic experience, your extension agent experience, you can see that they're under fertilized, or they don't have access to enough nutrients. You know, they're short, they dry up early, they're a very light color. All of these things come to eye. The good thing about legumes is to get to a decent threshold, a good yield, if not a great one, you don't need a lot of those external inputs because of that ability. And so in that first year, yes, they can bring a lot of benefits. And then because you're actually helping get a more balanced whole farm, you are getting those benefits from the rotation over future years. And that was one of the kind of early gratifying points for us, was in year 2, when those 40 farmers came back and said, that field I had cowpea in last year, or soybean in, you know, my maize is doing excellent. And that's when that kind of second stage clicked, or switch flipped for a lot of our farmers.
That's terrific, because they say in the emerging markets where we work with, people live day to day.
Yeah.
They don't want to listen. As soon as you say, well, years from now, you're going to have the best soil fertility in the whole of Zambia, I go, yeah, but am I still even going to be here, by then?
Yeah.
But it sounds great. Tell me something about the market, which you mentioned, for what these guys are producing. Did this market exist when you guys arrived there and started your work, or did you develop it, would you say?
In small quantities, it existed, and we actually kind of stumbled into it. We finished our first year where we had a certain amount of production of cowpea, which is better known here as black-eyed pea, and we did not grow it as seed. We grew it for commodity markets, but the government contacted us and said, we have an emergency. We don't have access to any cowpea seed. Would you consider cleaning it up and having this be classified as kind of the very lowest tier of seed which we can use to plant? And we said, sure. And through that, we got to engage in the seed system, and we started to explore further relationships, and all of it built from there. And we found that there was a certain size market which we could grow into for about 3 or 4 years, which was ready and underserved. But then if we wanted to go beyond that, we had to think a little bit differently about how we were going to grow the market. And that's where kind of the beauty of working with seed and genetics comes in, because the whole world is full of potential. There's all these different varieties of beans, of peanuts, of all these different legumes, and maize as well. that you can pick and choose from in order to find the best fit for your region and for what people want. And this just hadn't been happening in Zambia for a really long time. Instead, breeders had been kind of going off of a few things like yield, what's the highest yielder, that weren't necessarily the best overall fit. And so we came in and we started by talking to markets. We started by talking to snack peanut companies and canning companies for beans, the ultimate pull markets that drive where the final crop is going to go, and determine the specs that they want. And then we work with breeders, public and private, to bring those into Zambia, to test them in local context, and ultimately to multiply them with our small-scale network. What that does now is when we sell the seed to other smallholders, last year we sold to about 80,000 small-scale customers. We can connect those customers to the same people we learned from at the beginning of the cycle, and the customers of our seed can now also have access to good markets. And so even though our core impact model is that seed multiplication with 5,000 farmers, we can now connect the customers of our seed to good markets as well.
That's terrific. That's terrific. So I know something, believe it or not, actually about seed multiplication. I was assigned as a consultant for the UN to a seed multiplication project in Nicaragua. So I learned all about foundation seed.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I really had to read up on that stuff. That is not a simple process.
No.
And one of the complaints or excuses a lot of people who work with emerging markets for not working with the people that you work with and we work with, small producers, they say, oh, those guys can't get us the quality, they give us all this junk and we have to throw half of it away. So is that a problem for you guys?
It has been at times, but again it comes back to just expectations from both sides, and being very clear on what your quality parameters are. And we don't hide from this relationship with our farmers. We say, we tell them, if you're not delivering, we'll move to your neighbor, and we'll see if they're, willing to do a little more cleaning throughout the year and that kind of thing. It's very merit driven on both sides. If we're not performing on our side of the deal as well, we fully expect them to produce for another company, and it's been a big shift. But a lot of our system, as I mentioned earlier, is about personal relationships. It's also about kind of building history with farmers. And so we have a system where we have our own kind of credit scoring or know your client information for each of our growers, which incorporates the quality they deliver and the quantity and loyalty and attendance at trainings, all of these things. And that helps us make decisions on who gets larger contracts, who grows with us over time. The incentives we provide are very good. The price premiums are quite strong and differentiating. And so the farmers that do deliver on that quality are very happy to be with us. And we got some results earlier this year from a survey that was done by Lean Data out of Acumen, where our net promoter score was really in the top tier of the kind of social enterprises throughout Africa, mostly as a result, I think, about just clear expectations and treating these small-scale farmers, regardless of size, like they deserve to have some scrutiny.
Brilliant, yeah. So tell me a story about a client who is in your system and who you would say, this person, because I know I'm gonna quote you here, your goal is to move these people into the middle class.
Yeah.
Is there anybody you would say that's actually happened with that person, or is close, or is on the way?
Yeah, there are a few, quite a few actually, especially as we go all the way back to that kind of beginning group and the group of 400 after that, because it does take time. It takes some years, but we're starting to see houses come up.
Wow.
Houses that, I mean, if you saw them on the edges of DC, they wouldn't be too out of place. They're really nice, and It's just the amount of kind of thought and planning and structure that goes into these houses. These are 4 or 5 bedroom houses, like very, very different from the 1 room, 2 room kind of thatched surface that you've seen before. And there's a bit of a culture in Zambia, not a bit, it's quite prevalent, about not outshining your neighbors. You know, so there are a lot more people who we know from what we're passing out to them that are doing well enough to build these houses but aren't. You know?
Or they disguise them. When I worked in the Ukraine one time, this was during the Soviet era, and there were people who their farm looked like absolute rubbish. Not their farm, but their house.
Yeah.
But when you entered it, there were like there were 25 Harley Davidsons gleaming there, clocks on the walls and everything. So I know the culture.
Yeah, it's dressed up a little bit in reverse. It's dressed down.
Yeah, right.
But the stories I really like are the people who get to start another business, because we all believe very strongly at Good Nature that not everyone that's farming is born to be a farmer or wants to be a farmer. It is what they came into. It's what they know. Yeah. And so the future of these economies is really quite more diverse than it is right now. And we like when farmers do well enough to actually leave engaging with us. You know, they start a shop or they start a business doing processing of agricultural goods, and that's what they want to do. And those are the real success stories to me.
That's a great story. Really, that's the kind of thing I know our supporters in Finca. Some of you are probably viewing this, and Carl here is achieving what we've been working for now 4 decades. You've done it in how many years? 4? 5?
I wouldn't say we've done it, but anyway, we've been working on it for 5.
I'll be the judge of that. Don't be too modest, Carl. It doesn't pay.
Okay.
But no, seriously. I mean, we have clients in Uganda that have built these modular houses because that's often the way they do it. They start with just a kitchen and a bedroom, and then they start adding spaces. They have the wherewithal, and it's a wonderful thing to see. And it's if it's prolific, then you're really on to something, I think. So tell me, what's the division of labor between you and your partner Sunday? Because partnerships, in my experience, they're not easy. If you get a good one that works, in my case, my partner, John Hatch, we joke, well, some of our marriages haven't worked out too well, but this partnership has really worked. Huh? Yeah. So how's your experience going?
No, it's
Sunday. I hope you're watching.
He'll hear it eventually. He won't see it. We also have a third co-founder, Kellen, who I have to bring into the mix as well. Kellen was at UC Davis the same time I was, and in the business school. And I'm a farmer, I'm not a businessman. So she brought those skills kind of right at the beginning. But for the 3 of us, it's really been not seamless, but it's evolved well. And we've had pretty clear division of labors from the start. Sunday is our head of talent, which is HR, it's recruiting, it's local government relationships, it's a lot of things that really make us function at a local level. But of course, chipping in on relationships with external supporters as well and stakeholders as well. And Kellen has been kind of part-time active, but she's in charge of our board of advisors, which we're happy to have Ami Dolal from Finca Ventures on. And she's becoming more and more active over time. And so it's always a shifting relationship, like a marriage, I suppose. There were times in the early days when every employee of Good Nature, when we had 5 or 6, lived in the same house, which was also our office, and that's when it really felt like
the entrepreneur's journey.
Exactly.
We've all lived it.
Yeah, and now it's gone to that next stage. Each of us are kind of specializing in our own areas of the business, and we've built in support and built a very strong team, and it's nice to not be doing everything.
Yeah.
It's nice to be here in DC and not know every small thing that's happening in Zambia.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think of it as like it starts out with a one-celled animal like a protozoa, and then pretty soon you're not doing everything, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
I had my poor HR director at one point. She was IT, HR, administration, technology.
Yeah.
But we eventually branched out. So you mentioned Finca Ventures.
Yeah.
So tell me about that relationship. How do you see us as an investor in you?
What we look for in investors is someone who's honest, someone who's or a group or a team who's forthright and will tell you exactly what they think. That kind of feedback is critically important at all stages, at all times in the relationship, before they invest, during the process of closing, afterwards, and Finca has that through and through. There's an early story with Ami, kind of the first time that they came to visit. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it.
I think I might be, but go ahead.
Where, you know,
Is this the why am I here
yes,
story?
yes.
Yeah,
We
but go ahead.
Ami knew a
sure.
little bit about us and what we were doing, and I was in full pitch mode, as an entrepreneur, saying this is what we do and this is why it's great and we benefit farmers by this much, and this is the income change. And I got about 10 minutes in, and Ami just stopped me and said, "Okay, great. I understand why you're here. Tell me why I'm here." We're looking at doing, a convertible note investment, which was equity based, and we're an impact fund, and you guys are doing great work. But why am I here?
She asked me the same thing, by the way.
Okay, great. And I just thought, what an incredible question. And from there, the conversation just shifted. We stopped the pitch, turned off the automated response mechanism for the entrepreneur, and got into what are we really trying to accomplish, and what are we building as a company, as an organization? Why are we structured as a for-profit? Why do we believe that we need to be a for-profit company in order to have markets as the main mechanism for how we operate? And it definitely to this day, it changed the way that I think about good nature, and it kind of set the tone for our relationship as well. And then post-investment, Finca Ventures has been a real leader amongst our kind of core group of investors in terms of follow-on support. It really set the standard. We've had like a group led by Michael coming out and helping to document our work. He's been instrumental in terms of convincing us to put ourselves out there more and helping us get there. Alex, who also works in the ventures team, has just been supportive in every way, connections all the time. I mean, these are the things you look for. The things that help a company grow beyond the capital. And, now that we're at a slightly different stage and looking at this Series A, it's the same. We are able to learn from the blueprint of this Finca relationship how to think about investors at the next level. Who can help us grow to that next tier? Who can help us think about more sophisticated debt structures? Who's seen ag acquisitions? All these things that you want to think about years down the road, they grow with you. And so Finca and our other current investors have helped us learn how that should look.
Terrific. And are you guys working now with our bank there in Zambia?
We are. It's early days, but it's incredibly exciting. Being the way we're structured, when we work with these 5,000 farmers, we're in the seed multiplication. We're doing all of that financing in-house, and it's fine for that, that scale. We can manage that, but we're not a bank ourselves. And beyond that, we don't really think that credit for annual inputs is the way to go. What we've learned over time is that farmers at different parts of the season actually have enough funding to cover the next year's accounts. And so getting involved in credit when you don't need it, as anyone in any economy, here, there, anywhere, can tell you, can actually put you in more trouble. And so with Finca and the bank over there, we're doing some really incredible work, we think, with e-wallets, which is a kind of mobile-based savings product. Targeted savings, so that farmers both in the seed network and on the customer side can set aside and say, okay, I need to raise $90 for my inputs between May and October, and pay into that slowly, so that you don't end up taking out a credit facility the next year. You're taking your money from harvest and you're paying it into your savings right away, for a specific purpose. And beyond that, it also helps us kind of track our multi-year financial goals with each of our growers. So when we engage with these farmers, we set 1 year, 3 year, and 5 year financial goals. And we can now link our kind of other app, which is Smallholder. It's a field tracking app, farmer tracking app, to this Finca system, so we can see how they're performing against that. You can set an actual savings target where farmers put money in over 5 years to send a kid to college, or to do the next piece of that modular house, or any of these, to start a business. And it's that collaboration that's made it real.
That's fantastic. I'm so glad to hear that, because we are big on what we call financial health of our customers. We know that credit is a tool and savings is a tool, and they need to be used responsibly if you're really going to get the benefit out of it. So that's wonderful to hear. Now, you mentioned the future, so hit me with the big vision. Where's GNA going to be 10 years from now?
That is a big one. Yeah, so we really feel like where we're at right now, we have the winning formula. And what we need to do over the next 2-3 years is deliver the winning results. We've been growing, we've been testing things at different scales, we've been adding people to the team. We're at a system now where we're actually adding a second business line. We're adding a second revenue line, which opens up a lot of doors for us. And this is what I mentioned before about helping close the loop for customers of our seed. So when these customers of our seed finish their season, or when they enter the season, we'll connect them with Finca. We'll help them save towards that input package that they'll start with. We work with large groups of farmers, about 2,000 at a time, so we'll actually send them a highly trained, college-educated extension agent to work with their organization. And then Good Nature, for certain crops, will be the market that buys that crop back, and then we're going to export it and move it around the world. And so this means that we're not just working directly with the 5,000 seed growers. We're also able to work with the 80,000 farmers who are producing our seed for the next stage market. So we want to continue growing with that model, beginning by exporting to South Africa, by working with really select traders that are moving goods to Europe, ultimately looking at how we can move in value chains like beans and build on that over time. And that just opens so many doors for us to explore new geographies. Now with the ability to track each of our farmers and see how they're saving and keep it at an individual level, but still have that market access for so many, we want to spread first to Malawi, which we're formalizing this year. From there, we'll be looking at moving into Tanzania, other areas or other countries in our kind of Southern African hub of influence, and really follow that model of linking customers of our seed to the next stage, export better value markets. And we'll be growing that for about 3-4 years, investing in processing along the way and transportation and the facilities to make it happen, before eventually looking at setting up other hubs that can serve other markets. So potentially West Africa, which can serve Europe better, has different structure, and we'll just kind of reset the nucleus in these other sites. Hopefully we can learn from groups like Finca who have really thought globally, and build out structures of using data well, and working with, keeping that personal relationship with farmers, so that it can become a system that we can deploy anywhere. And you're able to adapt to the key parts of the blueprint to what you teach in agronomy, for example, to fit an area, which varieties you're introducing, how you're working with different regulators and government actors, but the core remains the same. It's about providing those services to farmers that they're currently not accessing, and doing it in a way that's really driven by the markets that they can access with a little bit of assistance from us.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that was brilliant. You mentioned Series A, which is also on the entrepreneur's journey, and then there's B, and you get through the whole alphabet if you're doing really well. So describe to me where you are, and if you're still looking for new investors.
Okay, yeah, we definitely are. This Series A is really exciting for us. We've been running extremely lean, leasing where our headquarters are, leasing the farm on which we do our foundation seed production. And this is really about solidifying our base. It's about investing in our place in a way that allows us to further invest in its capabilities. You know, things like bringing on irrigation for the foundation seed production, adding a first-rate laboratory for our seed analysis there in eastern Zambia, of which there's really nothing of the sort right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're raising about $1.5 million for this Series A for people that are interested in kind of solidifying that base, putting a little more gas in the tank, and moving us to that next level forward.
Well, I hope you'll include us.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we intend to.
That's good news. All right. Well, I think we're running out of time here. But Carl, thank you so much. How would people get in touch with you?
Yeah. I hope they do. I hope if you're listening, watching, you do reach out. You can find us on our website, which is goodnatureagro.com, or Twitter @goodnatureagro. You can contact me directly, carl.jensen@goodnatureagro.com, on email. I'll stop short of the phone number. So
Okay.
any of those work.
Thanks, Carl. That's it for the Social Enterprise Podcast, this edition. We hope you'll check us out next time. You can reach me at Rupert Schofield on Twitter, or you can reach Finca at Finca on Twitter. So thank you for joining.